Hello and welcome. Today I'm joined by Sean Connolly, who is the Medical Service Manager and Lead Physio at the FAW. So thank you, Sean.
Morning. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, no, well, I'm hoping you're going to stick to your end of the bargain and reveal some of these skeletons that we've been chatting about beforehand. So we'll get round to that.
Yeah, well, I'll fire away.
So I know that you're from this neck of the woods, so I'm in Manchester currently, but you're the northern lad, aren't you? But I know is it Sheffield you're from originally?
Yeah, Sheffield, mate. Wife's from Manchester, but yeah, a northern lad, mate. Yes, very much so. But being down in Cardiff for 16 years, you know, I finished my playing career and then moved down to take the Cardiff City job with Dave Jones, who was my manager when I was playing. And so it was like kind of the start of my second part of my career as a physio, really.
Yeah, so in terms of the football then, so obviously you were a good footballer growing up, but how did that transpire that you went into being a professional?
Yeah, you know, obviously grew up playing football, obviously quite good at it, was associated with Rotherham United as a kid growing up, was a schoolboy. And then you got to that age at 16 and was told, you know, sorry, but no thanks, you're too small. But fortunately for myself, my mum was a nurse and had said to me, listen, you've got to have a backup as a career. And I'd always fancied doing physio. I'd done some voluntary work at the spinal injuries unit in Sheffield, the Lodgemore Centre then. So it was a case, well, I went and did my A-levels and went to Pinderfields and got my degree in physiotherapy. But so whilst I was playing at uni, I was playing like semi-pro football, and then in my last year at uni, I was playing in the first team at Stockport. So it was a case of I got my physio degree and then kind of got offered a contract and thought, right, this is the path that I'm going to take. And fortunately for me, I had a successful playing career for 12 years, managed to keep some of my clinical practice up, and then took it back up when I retired. So, you know, that was it.
Yeah, so what was that like? I didn't know that you'd done your degree actually before you went professional then. So, like, what made you decide to do that then?
Well, it was not my hand was forced, is that I realised is that the football business is, you know, trying to make it as a professional footballer is tough. And it was a case of, let me get something that I've got a career as a physio, something that I was always wanted to do. But that I got the physio degree, and it was a case of, you know, I've got an opportunity to play football. I didn't know how long that was going to last. Was it going to be a 1-2 year thing? Was it just going to be you know, a flash in the pan? But no, fortunately for me, it went from strength to strength. I had a couple of decent moves, and you know, amassed 500 plus games at senior level. Had a good career, had some great times at Stockport. Had a good move to Wolves and some good times at Tranmere as well. So and through that, you know, I was always planning for that next step, which was going to be after playing. So I managed to keep up my skills, not too much clinically, but I was doing a little bit around in the game, and some clinic work and a bit of voluntary work over the years. And it was a kind of a natural progression for me to stay in the game. When I got the opportunity, I could have carried on playing, but I got to 35, and it was a case of my body was feeling a little bit kind of tired, and it was just an easy progression. I understood the environment I was in, and Dave gave the opportunity to come to Cardiff, and that was it. You know, it was just it worked out perfectly looking back.
Yeah, I'll going back. Were you at Stockport in '96? Because I'm an Everton fan, and one of my favourite games was when Everton played you guys in the FA Cup in '96.
Yeah, I played both games.
Right, yeah, so the replay.
Well, you know, it's funny you said that. If you watch the replay, which was, I think you won, I think it was 3-2 or 2-1. Yeah. Johnny Ebrell scored. Well, if you watch Johnny Ebrell just glides past me before he bangs one in the top corner in the last minute. Yeah, that was me just watching. And probably clapping after he struck it.
Yeah, well, he doesn't score many goals like that because I was watching a lot of those ones, so he saved it for against you guys.
Yeah, I had a nice black eye after that. Duncan Ferguson gave me a nice elbow. I remember that well. Yeah.
Well, if it was only one, then you got off lucky.
Yeah. They were good. They were good times. I know Stockport aren't in a particularly good position at the moment, but the halcyon days at Stockport County were that kind of 93 to kind of 2000, and we had some good years. You know, we got to the semi-final of the League Cup. We did pretty well in the league, and I think we finished 7th in the Championship one year. I had 6 good years in the Championship, and you know, Stockport were quite a force back then. You know.
Yeah. What was Dave Jones like? I know Lee Jones, so I played football with his son Lee.
Lee was an apprentice at the time at Stockport, so Lee actually, so I know Lee well. Dave was a good manager. He was very much kind of gave the onus to the players to go out and perform. You know, he liked 4-4-2, and he put good players in place. If you looked at the sides then, and he went on and had a good career at Southampton as a manager and did really well before his infamous court case, and then moved to Wolves and got them promoted to the Premiership. I was there when we did that, and so he had a knack at giving players, some players a second chance that had probably drifted in the game, but he had an eye for a good player. You know, we had some good times, and he liked good football, but. Unfortunately, he's not in the game anymore. But no, I got on really well with Dave, and you know, I had a lot to thank Dave for giving me the chance from a physio point of view to get into the game at a good level when I retired.
Yeah, and then going forward to at Tranmere, then was Clint Hill at Tranmere when you were there as well?
No, Clint had left. I was at Tranmere 2000, and I think I went there in 2002 to 2004. So I had about 20 months there. So Clint wasn't there, no.
Right, yeah.
Mickey Mellon. I played with Mickey Mellon, who's obviously back there as manager now. So there was a few there at the time, a couple of legends from the time that they'd just been relegated. I think they'd had a few years in the Championship. But yeah, I had some good times there.
Yeah, I mean, I just love that era of football. So I had an Everton season ticket at that point. Just absolutely was obsessed with it. So yeah, that game. So I was just doing some research beforehand, and I watched the clip of that. So I didn't spot you doing the Ebro, but I'm going to go back and put it on.
Yeah, well, I had a mop of ginger hair back then, and obviously it's physios. It fell out since I've gone back into physiotherapy. Obviously the stresses of being a physio these days, but yeah, look out for my ginger wig.
So in terms of like just as a player then, what was your experience? Because you were already a physio. Like, did you get involved in anything, or were they asking you to do extracurricular work for them?
Well, mate, yes and no, really. To be fair, when I first went from university into the game, I struggled a little bit at first, Andy. To be fair to you, I couldn't take. I'd gone from obviously an intellectual academic setting to then being into a football setting. After about 6 months, I nearly packed in. I just couldn't get the day-to-day banter side of things. So I really kind of struggled to get to grips with that. But then after about 6 months, the physio at the time was a guy called Roger Wilde, and he was at the time he was doing his physio degree at Salford when they did, when they started the PFA started the Salford physio course, and he was doing that. And so, believe it or not, at the time I filled in when he was doing these placements and stuff. I'd help him out a little bit, and then so some of the times I'd get questions from the players, and it was me. I was still learning my kind of trade as a physio, not being involved in that like elite sports side of things. So it was me about taking in the environment and learning what professional football was about then. But don't get me wrong, I mean, the game's changed massively over the last 15, 20 years. So when I look back now at what the medical department looked like at a club then and what it does look like now are completely different, But, interesting times, yeah.
Yeah, no, I can fully imagine that. So then, going forward then, so when Dave asked you to go and join the team at Cardiff then, so did you have any reservations about doing that?
No, I think it was that natural progression. Is that I realised is that the beauty for me was I'd got a second career and something I was passionate about and I always wanted to do. And so that move was obviously daunting, moving my young family down into Cardiff. And you know what it's like, and you follow a manager. I was always worried around that managers change pretty quickly in football, and managers take their own personal assistants and medical teams sometimes. And it was a case of, is it going to be a long-term thing or is it going to be a short-term thing? But it was a no-brainer really, because it was I wasn't going to carry on playing. I dropped down. I'd had a year at Rushden Diamonds in that bottom division, which was, between me and you, shit, if I'm honest. The standard of football was poor, and so it was quite an easy decision. I didn't want to carry on playing at that level, and so it was a natural progression. But it was just about me adapting. I'd been accepted as a player, but now I'd got to put my physio hat on and be on the other side and get the respect from the players and management that I could actually manage a medical department and get the players fit. So all of a sudden, instead of being that patient, I was on the other side of things. So it was a kind of a quick, steep learning curve. But at the time at Cardiff, we'd got some experienced professionals that I knew and had played against, and that had got a lot of games under the belt. And so that transition was easy, because the club was successful at the time and had, I think, recently been promoted to the Championship. And so things were good on the pitch, which always helps in this environment. If things are good on the pitch and getting results, then things off the pitch are a lot easier. And I found that transition was quite easy in the end.
So who was at Cardiff then, player-wise?
Oh, well, there was the start of a change in. There was Neil Ardley. There was people like. We brought in Steve McPhail. I think Peter Whittingham started. We all within them first 12, 18 months. Joe Ledley, Jason Kumas, some really good players, and that was the start of when Cardiff City played. You still speak to some of the Cardiff City fans, and I'm sure they'll tell you is that was, some of the better days when they played some good football. And we signed the likes of Robbie Fowler came, Hasselbank. We signed some good players, and Cardiff were quite renowned for playing some good football, but just actually couldn't get over that final hurdle, which was into the promised land. And they did that after Dave had gone under Malky Mackay. But they had some great players, players.
Yeah, and then how did you find that like becoming then in charge of the players? Like, did they like give you a load of stick or what, or was that the standard anyway?
Yeah, I think that's standard. I think like I said, I'd got to earn the respect from the players that I could do the job. I think I'd got the respect that I'd been in the game, I'd been as a player, but I was quite keen to be able to show them that I could stand on my own as a physio as well. And I think that was really important. I got that. I knew what the game was around. I knew the environment, and I think that came quite naturally to me. And I think once you've got you've got to understand the game and understand what it is, the environment that you're working in. I see so many people these days that don't understand football, but yet are making decisions around football matters. And I think that's really difficult. And I'd got that inside information. I've also done my coaching badges, so I'd got both sides of it. I found that the later stage stuff really quite handy, that I could get out on the pitch and deliver what I wanted to be able to deliver to the players, and instantly you've got that respect that you can go out there and put on the sessions, and it was quite good. Don't get me wrong, it was a steep learning curve. I was learning around, I think as a physio working in elite sport, I've got good stories and stories where things didn't go quite right. And, we had, players, you were always after that kind of pinching days here and there. And I think we've all got stories where things didn't quite go right and players had setbacks, and looking back, they're the learning curves and how we manage them going forward. I think it's difficult. We've all been there. But again, that's the nature of the beast, and we're always trying to push them barriers, and it's tough at times.
And how big was the department when you went in?
Well, the department was myself, and then we had a sports therapist, and we had a kind of a doctor that came in and out. So it was literally a two-man band full time, and that quickly became. I employed another physio and another soft tissue therapist. So that quickly became 4, and then I think that by the time that I left, we had 3 physios, 2 sports masseurs or 2 sports therapists. We had you'd have a part-time chiropractor, there'd be a part-time podiatrist, there'd be 2 sports scientists, all that came under that kind of performance umbrella, and that's within a space of kind of 6 or 7 years, which was quite scary, and how the club and that kind of department grew. And I look at it now, and I look at what I've got on tap at international level, and we've got more staff. We've probably got best part of 20, 30 staff that are covering. We've got more staff than we've got players, which is incredible, really.
Yeah. And in terms of how does that progression then? So at Cardiff, how does that translate into? How does it move from that second member of staff from a physio perspective? How does that happen? Is that something that you suggest to management, or is it the manager, or?
Yeah, and I think it just, the game, that was the start. If you remember back when we looked at what kind of Sam Allardyce was doing at Bolton, and the kind of revolution around sports science, and actually, if you've not got the best players, how are you going to get the best out of the group of players that you've got? So then the focus changed onto injury prevention. How can we get the best out of these players? Load management and all that side of it, and then. So what Sam had proven was that if you invested money off the pitch with the right kind of staff and the support system around these players, is that you can do wonders with these players. You look at the success that he started at Bolton and what he achieved, and I think that people took that model, and managers and clubs started to say, well, right, if we're treating these players and paying them X amount, then if you're driving a Ferrari, you don't want to employ a Skoda mechanic, and it's a simple. It's just simple. Why are we not investing in player health and everything around them, the support system? So we got the backing of the club. Peter Ridsdale was here at the time, and he was like, yep, if we want to grow as a club and we want to go to that next level, let's get it sorted. And we got so far with it, and it worked in the end, because we had that kind of level of commitment from the staff. And when Malky came, he added to it again. And we got there eventually, and I think you look at most clubs these days, and the support staff and there's a support system around the players, and even you look at the top level of the game these days, and the players have got the support at the clubs, but most of these players have got outside support as well, and that's where the game's it's the money in the game has allowed that to happen.
Do you ever think it can get too much in terms of that, in terms of having so many people involved?
Yes, I think that's where it's really important that somebody sits at the top that can decipher all this information that's coming in, and then allows the manager to make an informed decision. All right, because too many chefs spoils the broth, right? So if you've got everybody that's and everybody that tends to work at this level as an opinion, and I think as a department, it's important that everybody's opinion's respected, but then somebody can sit at the top and say, right, between us, we've got to come to a decision that is the best for the team and that player individually. And so I think when you've got that kind of department where everybody's opinion is respected, and then somebody's got to say they've got to make a decision, I think that's where the departments will succeed. I think when you've got people, the game, you hear about it, there's a lot of backstabbing in football. There's a lot of one-upmanship and secrecy, and people don't want to share things. And that particular side of the game, I dislike immensely. I think You know, if you get to know me personally, I'm very much open. I want to hear. I don't want to sit around a table with people that have all got similar skills to myself. I want to listen to people that can bring something else to it, and then it's about myself making a decision around a player with other people that have got different opinions to myself, and then we can make a decision. So it's about who sits at the top, and then bringing that information together and how and what we do with it, you know.
Yeah, no, definitely. And then you mentioned Peter Ridsdale then. So yeah, what's he like as a character? Because there's some infamous stories, whether they're true or not, I've no idea from the Leeds days. But
you know, he was fantastic here, and I know he left. You know, if you speak to Peter about his time at Cardiff, he was post the Salmon era. He took the club, built a new stadium, took us out of the old training ground, and then delivered a new stadium, delivered it into new owners, and left the club. He'll probably tell you that he left the club in a better state. Through my time here with Peter, I mean, the club went from strength to strength. I know there were times when financially there were questions around the sustainability of what Cardiff were trying to do, and was it financially sustainable? You know, I didn't get involved in too much of that. But from our experience, what happened at the club during that time, and the players and where the club were, I've got nothing but, you know, praise to say about what Peter did.
And he was obviously bringing in some big players there. You mentioned like Robbie Fowler and Hasselbank. What was it like when you were bringing in players like absolutely huge names in the game? Like what was it like having their like personalities, ability, like training wise?
You know what? Robbie was a little bit unlucky. He had a bit of he had surgery when he came, so he had a little bit of time off. But Hasselbank, you know what? I don't think he ever missed a day's training or was never not available, which was unusual for somebody who was in probably the twilight of his career. You know, you get these journeymen, you know, the game's littered with them they'll just try and pinch a year here, a year there, and not really play. But to be fair to him, he came and he delivered. Robbie was the same when we actually got him fit. But again, Robbie's career had been he'd had a few injuries, so I think when you sign anybody like that, but his value from a training perspective and what he gave the younger players was second to none. I have to say, I've seen a lot of players and played with a lot of good players, but Robbie was by far the best finisher I've seen. Left foot, right foot, whatever it was in training, he was unbelievable, and a great lad to have around the dressing room, and he was fantastic.
Yeah, I can imagine. But yeah, I mean, Hasselbank's not a bad finisher himself, so
he scored. He did really well. He scored some good goals, and I think it was the year that we actually ended up. I think it was the FA Cup final we got to that year. I'm sure it was 2008. I think it was. But yeah, they were. That was Peter. He liked the name, and Dave Jones was a bit like that as well. They liked to sign the kind of the name players he'd got for Stevie, Mike, Peter Whittingham, big names, Jay Bothroyd, Michael Chopra, you know, Robbie Fowler, and you know, it worked for Cardiff City at the time.
Mm-hmm. So how did it transpire that you left Cardiff then?
Left Cardiff. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer came. Ole, to be fair, didn't have a particularly successful time here. That was the time that they got relegated. But a friend of mine who I'd played with, Kevin Cooper, I played with at Stockport and at Wolves, had gone into kind of coaching, got his coaching badges, and he'd got an opportunity to go out to Switzerland to manage in the Swiss leagues. And it was one of those, he asked me if I fancied going as head of performance. And I said at the time, okay, I'd had 9 years at Cardiff City. I was ready for a kind of a change. And it was something that I took the family out. You know, the package to go out there was included accommodation, kids in private school. And it was just too good not to go out there. You know, it only lasted kind of 18 months. You know, it was a tough decision to make. The kids didn't want to go, but then in the end, when we came back 18 months later, they didn't want to come back. So you know, it was a great time. It was a difficult time out there because it wasn't quite what it was made out to be. But from a life changing experience, then it was fantastic. I'd recommend anybody to do it. Different culture, learn to speak a different language, and then adapting what I'd learned as a physio in the Championship and at Cardiff City, and then taking it to a club that traditionally Servette. I mean, in Servette in Geneva, in the Swiss football terms, are a massive club, but they'd had some tough times. But it was a case of we'd got a project trying to rebuild what Servette, and they wanted to get back into the big league. But it didn't quite work out from a financial backing that the new owners had put in place, and so I ended up being offered the job at Crystal Palace. So I kind of left before the manager left. But it was a great 18 months, but it was different. But again, it was a great experience.
What was Geneva like living there? Because I know it's got a reputation of being quite a sort of quiet place.
It's a stunning place to live. I actually lived over the border in France because Geneva's that expensive. But literally the borders, it was like still only 20 minutes into work, but I was actually living over on the French side of the border. But no, just a fantastic, you've got Mont Blanc in the background, and I'd got a ski resort at the back of me, and as a place to live, it was superb, beautiful place.
Yeah. And then, so okay, so you moved back to London, and how did that come about?
Yeah, I 2 seconds. Sorry, I'm on a call. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I've been touch base with Zaf, who was the doctor at Crystal Palace, and he had worked, but believe it or not, he'd worked with Craig Bellamy at Liverpool, and Zaf had put some feelers out. He was looking for a new physio at Crystal Palace. I spoke to him. He'd had a good recommendation of Craig Bellamy, which was good from my point of view. So he'd offered me the role over there, and it was quite a simple move for me. Is that obviously I knew things weren't going too well in Switzerland. I sent my family back to Cardiff, and I moved to a small flat in London, and took the head role at Crystal Palace. And Crystal Palace at the time were doing really well. And I had 2 great years there. Loved every minute of it. Zaf was fantastic. Got a full-time doctor working with you. We'd got another couple of physios, and again, everything was set up. It wasn't probably not when you look at the training grounds and everything that's in place at these top Premier League clubs. It wasn't on that level, but again, Crystal Palace had got by having that kind of family orientated setup, and worked really well for them. Steve Parish had knew what he wanted to do, and so that worked really well. But the manager at the time was Alan Pardew, and looking back, I think I have to choose my words carefully here. I'll put him down in the what can I say? Well, how can I be politically correct about that? Not different way of managing, a different way of managing as to what I thought he was going to be, and I don't think there was a couple of clashes on the way. I think his views and my views on what needed to be done from a performance and a medical perspective were not aligned. So that was interesting times. But he went, and then I moved on. I then got offered the full-time role at the FAW, but I've been working for the FAW since 2011. Gary Speed had given me the opportunity to start working with the FAW in 2011, but it wasn't full time. It was just in the international windows. Yeah, and then got the opportunity to make that full time in 2017.
So just going back into that then. So when you go into any club, not just with Alan Pardew there, but like how quickly do you think, hang on, we might have a problem here?
No, it's not so much a problem. I just think what you get used to is the more experience you get, is you understand that managers have their own way of doing things. And I think, some managers will embrace what the sports science and the medical team will put towards them. Some will just turn around and say, listen, we're doing it my way, that's it. And I think that's where you talk about all the people that are involved in the game these days is how that information gets delivered and is it taken on board. I think what I found difficult with Alan Pardew is that he didn't really want to listen sometimes to what was being said from a sports science and a medical point of view. And I think if you read articles since, Alan will tell, he's made that publicly quite clear, is that he'd do things his way and he'd want to do it a certain way. But I think it is difficult when you see managers that want to do things differently. I'm all for different, because there's no set way that people, we can play football hundreds of different ways. There's different methodology, and nobody's actually patented anything that's perfect yet. I get that, but I think there has to be a certain level of science behind it, and to ignore the medical and sports science, you do at your peril. But there are still people out there. Don't get me wrong. I think that there's a lot of the young managers and the young coaches these days are much more adept at taking on board performance aspects that they trust and will use. Whereas I think whether it's the older managers or the old school, they just want to do it their way and seem to be stuck in their ways.
Yeah, and you mentioned Steve Parish as well. Like, how involved do you get with like the kind of the non-playing team? So that's the manager and so on. But how involved do you get with like owners or chairmen, CEOs, etc.?
To be fair, you used to see Steve a lot around the training ground. He was always pleasant and, wanted to a personal level to it. Steve was probably one of the ones that, likes to do that. There are some clubs where you don't see the chief exec and the chairman, and, they stay up an hour out of the way. But to be fair, at the clubs I've been involved at, even from a playing perspective, the chairmans and the chief execs have always been kind of there to see and want to be involved, not involved too much involved, but always want to be seen around the place, quite personable. And I think that's quite important sometimes as well, that they've got that,
Yeah, definitely. So you moved back to Cardiff, and then so that was in a full-time capacity. Yeah,
so the FAW created a role around kind of, as we are, lead physio was going to carry on, and then as you see, that I've got this title as medical services manager. So within that is looking after all the other international teams, and then developing other aspects. So kind of away from physiotherapy, non-clinical stuff. So the clinical governance side of things. I'm also the FAW. We are a kind of FIFA centre of excellence, medical centre of excellence. It's my job to run that and be involved and collaborate with kind of academic institutions about driving research, partnerships with the hospitals about delivering medical care, and then looking at the domestic game in Wales as well. I'm also involved with the Welsh Government, delivering kind of CPR to schools and academies. So there's lots of different aspects to my role now as to what it has been traditionally, where it's been more kind of just purely about treating players and from a performance from match to match side of things. So don't get me wrong, when it comes up to camps, I'm sort of like slowly building up to next international window, where I've got to touch base with all the clubs and building them relationships with clubs and players and finding out where they are coming into next camp. But then there's also another side to my role, which is more kind of managerial and around other aspects of the medical side of things from an international national governing body side of things.
Yeah, I mean, and Wales have just been unbelievable recently. Like I was in Wales for the Turkey game in the summer, and it was just, I was in a pub and it was just absolutely class. It's an unbelievable game.
Yeah, and I think that stems from like you said, what the country achieved back in 2016, when it was our first kind of major tournament for many years. And the place went mental, and it was almost kind of you wanted to be here to appreciate that and spend time here and be part of that, but we were busy obviously in France at the time. But yeah, and again the Euros this year, we kind of touched on it with Turkey, and then it kind of didn't go a little bit flat after that, but I think we hit a bit of a brick wall against the Danes, and we'd gone into that tournament with a kind of a a lot of players that hadn't been really playing, and we've seen kind of a big turnaround in players since the last Euros. But again, for us to qualify again for 2 tournaments on the bounce has been magnificent. And again, we've got a big month coming up in November with Belarus and Belgium. If we beat Belarus, then we've got to get a point, I think, to secure a second spot in the table behind Belgium, and that kind of guarantees us a playoff place. So we're within touching distance of the World Cup for next year. So that's really exciting times for Wales. So yeah, they're doing really well at the moment.
And then just talk to me about the France experience, because that again was just a remarkable achievement. But what was that? What was it like going in? What was like the thought and the feelings about a realistic achievement for the tournament?
You know what? I think when we look back, the expectations were to let's just go and enjoy ourselves. You know, we were. Very rarely do you get in football, I've been in the game long enough to understand, is that if you get a group of players and a group of staff together that are all singing from the same hymn sheet and that everybody gets on, there's no egos, there's no kind of them and us. And that was clear to see, that the path and the journey that Chris Coleman and his staff we'd been through, and getting qualification and looking at what we achieved that year, you'd look at, you know, they're looking at the players and God, wow, nobody would have said that Wales would have got to the semi-final. And you know, looking back, we had a great kind of team camp. We'd not done anything. It wasn't massively palatious and out. You know, we took to Self up in the northwest region in a kind of almost like a retirement area. You know, it was a hotel that was renowned for people and older couples to kind of a resort, and we just bedded down there, and we had a great atmosphere. There's, you know, we've got people that are ensuring that the camp, you know, when you're on camp, it can be a long time on camp, you know, but there was always something going off. The players were always up to something. There was a lot of effort went into ensuring that the players didn't get boredom, and it worked. You know, the players went from strength to strength, and it was a fantastic experience. And I'm sure if you speak to the players, they'll tell you that after being on a camp like that, is that they struggled for a while after, because, you know, you become, it's almost like you're institutionalized. You know, every day this is set out for you. You've got 3 square meals. You go from doing, you know exactly what you're doing, and then all of a sudden you get back and you're thinking, wow, what am I going to do? But it, you know, as an experience to share with the staff and the players, was phenomenal.
And what do you do in that time period then, when you're away for, well, I presume it's a month or so?
A lot of it is, you know, don't get me wrong, when the build up to it is around getting the players kind of in a position to be ready for the games. I spent a lot of time pre the Euros, spending a lot of time with Joe Ledley. He'd had a fracture, and it was we were in kind of a bit of a rush to get him fit. So I'd spent a lot of my time building up to that event, trying to get him ready for the tournament. But when you're actually on camp, you know, the games come thick and fast every 4 days. So it's about recovery then. So it's about ensuring that everything that you put in place, that the staff are ready, that there's a process. The ones that haven't played are then training. It's just, it goes pretty quickly. But everything's set out. It's all meticulously planned. Don't get me wrong, there's some down days where the players that want to go and play golf could play golf. But let me tell you, it went without any hitches at all.
And what's it like when you're getting in? But obviously Bale being the most well-known one, but Bale, Ramsey, you just got like some of the world's best-known footballers playing for the biggest teams, but they all do seem to come together, like you were saying.
I think the one of the strongest things that Wales has got, you know, people like Gaz and Aaron, if you speak to them individually, they will tell you that they love coming away and playing for Wales. And I think in the past, you know, internationals has been a bit of a chore for some people. I don't know, you know, but particularly for Wales, the players want to come. I think what services I'd like to think what we provide when we're on camp. The players want to come. They've got great medical care. They enjoy training. We've got good facilities, and so that we've created that kind of environment is that players want to come and play for Wales. And I think that's why seeing that Gareth and Aaron want to come and play has attracted some of the younger players that could possibly have gone and played for other nations, has attracted them to come and see that there's a pathway and to play at the highest level that they can. So Wales have got a lot to offer the young players that can possibly play for other nations, but there's a strong pull to be able to play for Wales when you've got people like Gareth and Aaron representing the country.
Did you feel like an honorary Welshman now then?
Yeah, it's quite weird. Obviously, listen, I'm proud of where I'm from, but since we've been down here, my kids have grown up here. They'll speak Welsh. They took Welsh languages, etc., etc. So I do consider myself being adopted by the Welsh now. But yeah, it's a beautiful part of the world to live. And I've got I've thoroughly enjoyed my time down here.
Cardiff's an incredible city now, isn't it? They've put so much money into it. It's a great city.
It is, and like you said, we're not too far away from. I can go north and go up through the Brecons, and I can go west and I can go down to the Mumbles. It really is a beautiful part of the world. Really is.
Yeah. And then you mentioned earlier on about some of the other people that you'd studied with and so on, but what's the network like for you in terms of you keep in touch with people that you either studied with or so on? Yeah,
to be fair, I do. Probably the one I know you've interviewed him. I trained with Dave Hancock, so I keep in touch with Dave. Although you can probably read about Dave, you know what Dave's like. He likes to tell everybody in the world what he's doing, who he's working with. But he don't tell you about the times he used to charge us £1 for taking me from our digs to the train station, mate. He was always after a buck, mate. That man only breathes in. He's that tight. But yeah, so my network, people like Dave, there are other people. I have a close relationship with the physios with the medical teams at the clubs. The players obviously playing for Wales. Part of my role and responsibility is to get out to these clubs, see what they're doing, touch base with them on a regular basis, and that's quite a good way of networking. So I think that's a big part of the job, is that I want to make sure, and having worked in clubland, is that I know what it's like when players come away on international duties, and I know what I was thinking as a club physio is, oh wow, here we go, what are they going to do with him? They're just going to play him and not take anything, any advice that we're giving them. So I think it's really important that I understand that, is that these players, they're trying to look after. We've got to try and look after them, because when we go back, they've got to play another 4 or 5 games before they come again, and we're asking them to go again. So it's really difficult, and trying to ensure that they get what we want them to do, that we're able to deliver what they're having at their club. So, whatever that looks like. So it's my responsibility to ensure that these players are looked after like they are at the home clubs.
And that's been pretty smooth, has it?
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I think there's always there will always be incidences where clubs, we always see it, is that where players will come onto a camp, they've got a problem, and we'll make a decision that, listen, he's not great at the moment. Could he play? Could he not play? We'll send them back, and full well they're going to play the week after. When they go back to the clubs. I get that. Sometimes the clubs see the international window as an opportunity to rest players, give them a chance to get over the little niggles, the little knocks, those little injuries that need a bit of time, and I get that. So, but it is difficult when you've got the club's medical department are wanting this, but yet I know that we're trying to qualify for the World Cup and a European Championship. We don't have friendly games anymore, so they're all highly competitive. They all mean something to us, and so we're trying to we're trying to win games and qualify for World Cups, but yet sometimes clubs want us to rest these players and are quite prescriptive around what they think they should be getting and what they're not getting. And that's really difficult when you're trying to manage 28 players around 2 games that are massive games for us. And sometimes we'd like to think we get it right, but I think communication's what we're doing with them. This is what we're doing. I'm always on the phone to them saying, this is what we've done this week. This is our plan going forward. I spoke to the manager. He's looking at maybe can he get 45, 50 minutes out of him or 60 minutes, however that looks. Aaron was the case last camp. He'd come on the back of having a bit of an injury at Juventus. Juventus were obviously a bit cagey about him coming to us. I'd like to think that we managed him all right, and we had a full 90 minutes out of him against the Czechs, and then we decided that we weren't going to play him a full game against the Estonians, and we got him through it. And I've seen he's been back playing for Juventus when he's gone back. So sometimes it works in a favour that we can be that kind of bridge as well. We're giving them time on the field and minutes in games that allows them to be ready and available for the teams. But then on the other hand, I get it when players are coming to us and they've got issues that clubs want us to look after them, and it is difficult.
So, like when you're dealing with like Real Madrid, Juventus, then is the communication lines, is that more challenging?
It is a little bit, but obviously everybody's command of English is really good these days. I've got a good relationship with Juventus doctor, who's obviously worked in the English game as well. So his spoken English is excellent, and he understands what's needed. So that relationship's fine. I've been over to Madrid and spent a couple of days with their medical team, building them relationships, although the medical personnel at Madrid has changed a little bit over the last few years. But Gareth's has got his own people that look after him a little bit sometimes. So I've got relationships with those people. Like at the moment, Gareth wasn't involved in last camp because he's had a significant hamstring injury. So I'm communicating with Madrid at the moment and what that looks like, and is he going to be ready for the next 2 weeks. But so that communication is vital.
Yeah, no, well, good luck with managing that for the next break anyway. So just finishing off on a couple more then. This is always a difficult question, but are there any particular moments that you think that are the most memorable for you, either from playing, obviously the Duncan Ferguson elbow being one of them, but are there any other things that you sort of have in your playing career or in the role as a physio?
You know what? I think the Euros, I tell everybody, I think even I achieved a lot as a player. I never played at the top level. I played at championship level and played 500 games, which I thoroughly enjoyed. But I think my highlight throughout the 30 years I've been involved had to be the Euros and 2016. The experience of just being involved at it at that level was unbelievable. So that was a highlight. It was by far the best experience of being involved in professional football. From a personal level, I think I didn't score many goals. I scored my first goal was in the semi-final of the League Cup against Middlesbrough, live on ITV. I'd played 250 first team games. I had never scored, and then for some reason, I can't explain to you why, I made a little bit of a run and the ball broke to me and I've hit it on the volley past Schwarzer into the bottom corner, and the rest was a blur, because I still can't to this day to tell you why I went on that run. The manager was like, what are you doing? Where are you going? If you watch it, it's like there's no explanation why a right fullback would end up on the edge of the box, but I did, and I scored. So I think from a personal experience, that was probably the highlight of my career. But yeah, I think the Euro 2016 was phenomenal.
Yeah, no, it was pretty special, especially that Belgian match. That was just absolutely mental.
Yeah, mental.
And then in terms of people that have had a particular influence on you, you've mentioned quite a few managers and so on, but is there anyone who's like really stuck out, from whether it's a player, colleague, or anything that's had a big influence?
Oh, good question. I think I've met so many different people. It's like anything. As a practitioner, you take bits from courses that you do, and you become you'd like to think you become a better practitioner or a better clinician. I think the same in football is I've took things from managers and sports scientists and doctors, and I think I just become a more rounded person. There's no one person I think has had a massive influence. I think Danny Bergara was the manager that believed in me when he wanted me to turn professional. But I'd met Danny many years before as a youngster, when I was like 9 or 10, and he'd had a profound effect on me about practicing and the skills that I practiced, even as a 9 or 10-year-old. And then it was not until like 8 or 9 years later that our paths crossed again when I was doing physio, and that he said, listen, I want you to come down. And so he had looking back, he probably had a massive influence on me at a young age. And then when I was doing my physio and wanted me to, go into full-time football. So I think he's probably had more influence than anybody. But again, I think it's been more of a collective, those experiences around different individuals that have kind of made me who I am and where I am today.
Yeah, well, there's loads more questions, particularly about your playing career, because again, I just loved that area there. But maybe I'll do that off camera, and you can tell me a few more tales that are a bit more juicy from some of those things.
Yeah, I have said that if I wrote a book, you'd end up taking a few people down. But so I think that's why not many professional footballers write any books. But again, it's just I've been honoured. I've had 2 careers, one as a player and one as a physio, that have been dream jobs for myself. I can't believe how lucky I've been when I look at it. So it's just flown by. But there you go. Yeah.
And who was the best player that you played with, actually?
Played with played with. I was fortunate. When I was at Wolves, I was at the time when we signed Paul Ince, Dennis Irwin. Although they were at the back end of their career, great characters, great players, and you look at what they achieved individually at the times at Man United, and you look at Paul Ince. I mean, Paul played for the biggest clubs in the world: Liverpool, Man United, Milan. You don't play for them, and England. You don't play for them clubs and not be a good player. So I was fortunate to have played with them. I think players I've admired. Steve McPhail, who was at Cardiff. I thought he was a wonderful footballer, and so was Peter Whittingham. God rest his soul. I know he passed away, a while ago, but what a fantastic left peg he had, unbelievable. I think so. I've been really fortunate. Different players, I've met players that probably technically weren't great, but were leaders. Back in them days, back in the 90s, was fortunate enough to play with players that you thought, not great technical footballers, but yet every Saturday they went out, crossed that white line, and delivered. And were leaders and led by example. So I've been fortunate. I've played with some great players, met some great people. And then now at this time when I'm dealing with international players that are playing at the highest level, Gareth and Aaron that are playing at, you can't get any higher, and what they've achieved in the game's phenomenal. So I've been really lucky.
Yeah, no, this is genuinely the last question, but I've got to ask it now. As a right back, how do you think you'd have got on against Markin Bale?
Not sure. I'll tell you the story. A quick one. I played against Ronaldo when he was at Sporting Lisbon in a pre-season friendly. And, mate, he was 16 or 17. I've got the team sheet, right? I came on at half-time. My friend got sent off. We were down to 10 men. Ronaldo was playing against me. We lost 5-0. I think I needed 2 knee operations after. I think, but against Bale, mate, Bale at his peak was just phenomenal. Again, obviously there are ways of dealing with him, but again, his pace, his ability, and his left foot. And you sit and watch. I still watch him. You still watch him, and I know people talk about as Bale. Is he the player he was? No, he's not the player he was. He's a different player. He's aged. He's been used to playing a different kind of football for the last few years at Madrid. But he's still a fantastic player to watch. And if you ever get a chance to watch him now and how he plays and how he strikes the ball, just different level. It is a different level. It's you play at that level, but that level's, and then there's that level again. It's phenomenal.
Yeah,
pleasure to see.
Yeah, no, well, sadly we're never going to see that battle, but I will watch that Duncan Ferguson one again immediately after this. So yeah, brilliant, Sean. I really appreciate that. Really enjoyed it. So thank you for sharing those stories and your time. And I'm looking forward to coming to see you in a month's time or so.
Yeah, I'll see you in a month's time.
Good man. Thanks,
Cheers,
mate.